Welcome to Get Green, Northwest Indiana, your home for lawn care solutions with Steve Daly. Each podcast, you'll learn the secret tips to growing healthy green grass and best practice solutions for watering, weed and feed, aeration, and mowing. Here are your hosts, Steve Daly and Jim Jano.
Hey everyone, today we're going to look at what to do when your yard is so bad you're thinking about a complete lawn renovation. But according to Steve Daly, people all too often renovate when they don't need to. In fact, it's not just expensive, it may not even be your best solution. Today, you'll discover Steve Daly's best lawn care hacks for when your lawn is bad. Steve, where do we even start?
Well, first you determine what you got going on. A lot of people don't necessarily understand that if you start feeding the lawn, no matter its condition, sometimes it'll fill in on its own. And you can just do some, say, aerating and overseeding to get it to where it needs to be. If your lawn's full of weeds but there's enough grass plants to work with, you start feeding it, you clean it up, and maybe you're not renovating. But the first is to evaluate what you got going on, and I think putting it on some kind of fertilization and weed control program before you start spending loads of money renovating the lawn.
Now, when do we start? What's the best time of year to start a renovation program?
Usually as far as renovating the lawn itself, fall is the best time to seed. Early in the spring maybe, but generally if you haven't had some kind of fertilization program or controls, you don't want to do it in the early part of the year because of the fact that you want to get the weeds out and the competing garbage before you go into a renovation project. And then
Can I start with a clean slate?
Yeah, so you want to go through and see what you have. I think fertilizing it first and getting the weeds cleaned up is the appropriate way to go to see if it's something where if you don't have to start from ground zero, you don't want to. It's easier to develop something by fertilizing it first and cleaning it up. A lot of customers will be, oh, we should do the seeding now. I usually am of the belief that you got to try to work with it a little bit first.
Kind of assess the damage and see what's working and what's not working. And now, I also noticed that when you start new lawns, a lot of things seem to start in the fall. Why is fall such a great time?
Well, the best thing about it is, all right, anytime you're establishing a root system of the grass and you're trying to keep it from being damaged by that next summer's heat. If you seed in the spring, you're going to have to nurture and baby that lawn all year long. You're not going to be of the, I can just let it go. I can't. You got to water it. You got to take care of it properly. If it's something where you seed it in the fall, it's actually got 2 cool seasons before it hits summer heat to develop. And usually the root system's stronger and can handle it. Not saying that you still don't need to water it that next summer, but you're not watering it like a new lawn that next summer.
Got it. Yeah. And you've mentioned that you have to make sure you kill the weeds and not the grass that you have. How important is it to know what you're doing and have the right product? Anytime you're handling chemicals, I think it's important to make sure you know what you're doing.
First, you got to look at it and identify what you consider a weed and what you don't want in your lawn. Now, a weed is anything that is undesirable in the grass. Now, sometimes you'll have like coarse fescue plants, and some people don't want that in their lawn, not willing to deal with the management of that. Then you're looking at renovation. The coarse fescue is a turf grass, okay? It's just not a desirable looking one. Usually it's considered a weed. And the problem with that is it's a perennial. Now, these perennial grasses that have worked their way into these lawns, then you're talking renovation.
Really?
If you want to get rid of them, you're talking total kill and reseeding from scratch. If you're willing to deal with that a little bit and try to let them blend, you mow high, you try to do some things. Are they going to look perfect? No, you can have a nice looking lawn with some coarse fescue in it if there's enough to make it look right. If it's just a little bit and it's popping up, then you can spot manage that.
So now, as far as seeds seems to be important because a lot of times if you use the wrong seed, you could have problems later on. But you don't just throw, a lot of times you don't just throw the seed out. Sometimes you start with aeration.
Yeah, you gotta incorporate it into the soil in most cases. So you got to figure out which way you're incorporating it, whether you're opening it up with a dethatcher, which is more aggressive, or aerating it by pulling plugs and creating seed to soil contact that way, or just, raking it out and reseeding spots if they're little spots in your yard. But it just depends on how much you've got to do, especially not in clay. I mean, you're not going to just throw seed on clay and expect it to take unless maybe sometimes in dormant seeding when the ground is freezing and thawing and allowing it to enter that way. But if you're in the middle of spring, summer, whatever, and you just throw seed on clay, most likely it's just going to congregate to where there's other plants already there. It's going to move and it's not going to do you much good. Aerating, overseeding, dethatching, overseeding, or slit seeding, whatever you want to call it, is a way to incorporate it into the soil. We believe in aerating and overseeding. In most cases, we deal basically with established turf. We're not looking at a lawn renovation project. But you could, in theory, if you get enough holes in it, plug in it hard enough, almost establish a lawn straight from aerating and overseeding.
Really? So when you aerate, you're creating an area, like basically a plug hole, and then you drop the seeds in, and it's got oxygen. You water it, and then it expands.
Yeah, and then you like in most cases it depends on what situation you're in. Like, all right, if you're dealing with an established lawn that's maybe taken some damage, is it a bluegrass lawn? Is it, a mixed lawn? What is it? Generally in a full sun area with a project that is a bluegrass lawn, you're going to try to get as much bluegrass seed into it as possible. You're not going to work with, say, different varieties because it'll look weird. It will not be the same color. It'll be, so like if you have a bluegrass sodded lawn, we're going to use bluegrass seed. If you have a mixed lawn, we're going to try to work primarily with bluegrass but have some other stuff in the mix.
So when Permagreen comes out and they assess the property, one of the things you're doing is you're determining what kind of grass the homeowner has?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna, when you look at it for an estimate originally, and trying to analyze what they have, you want to know if it's a mixed lawn or if it's a sodded lawn.
Well, what happens if you assess the property and do you ever run into a situation where the grass seeds that they have is not indigenous or the best type of grass for Northwest Indiana?
Yeah, you'll find lawns where, and it was more of a, like, it is installed as a plug. Like zoysia grass has been a common old problem in like older subdivisions because zoysia it's a warm season grass. The plugs were promoted as a miracle cure for bare spots in a lawn, and it spreads very aggressively. The problem with up here where we're at is it's a warm season grass, so it doesn't green up until June and goes dormant, mid to end September. So you only get, 3 months of green. Very durable through drought, does a lot of good things that way, but it's not desirable. So you'll see older established lawns with these patches of yellow and weird, grass, and somebody's, put zoysia plugs in it maybe long before the homeowner got there. Now that's a renovation job. If you want to get rid of that, you're killing out the lawn.
So there are times where you have to say,
start from
wipe it out, start from scratch, and move forward.
Correct. And a lot of the times if you got zoysia problems or something like that, or if you've got enough of an undesirable grass, then yes, that's when you say you're looking at renovating.
Okay, well, let's say you have a property and they've got quite a bit of the wrong seed. Is there times where you will gradually introduce the right seeds and let it gradually work itself out, or is it always better just to start?
If it's a perennial grass, it's not going away.
Okay.
Okay, so like we have, I've had a customer that had a basically a turf type tall fescue back lawn with a front lawn that was, and I won't even call it turf type. It was K31 tall fescue. It's not generally, it's more of a foraging grass. They sell it at TSC. And the homeowner aerated their bluegrass front yard and overseeded it with K31 fescue. So this is a wider blade fescue, and it generally ruined the sodded lawn. And enough of it came up to how do you go through and selectively kill out this perennial grass inside of a perennial grass? You can't. It was too spreading. It was too everywhere. It germinated like crazy. So the whole lawn had tall fescue plants in it, and it just didn't look right. So it really needed to be renovated.
Is it common for homeowners to put different seeds on every single year? And is that a problem? I mean, does it start creating patches?
If you can find a good source for seed, I usually recommend going to the nurseries and finding a brand that is, commonly used. And I'm not talking about Scott's, blah, blah. I mean, I'm not saying Scott's seed isn't fine. You just got to read what the label says.
I really don't know what to look for, what kind of grass seeds, what works. I mean, my backyard, with all the windows I have, my backyard gets cooked. And until you guys took over my yard, I could not get my backyard to grow. My front yard, on the other hand, is protected by the southern sun exposure. I never had a problem with it, but you treat my backyard, my front yard differently.
No.
No? Well,
No,
why?
the fertilizers are the same.
Really?
I mean, yeah, it's a cool season grass. Your grass types are different front to back.
Okay.
If you've never noticed, I mean, if you look at your front yard versus your backyard, your front yard's a lot finer. You look at your backyard, you got a lot of tall fescue, actually. Turf type tall fescue, but it's tall fescue. And so if you look at the width of the blade, and it's kind of
It is different.
Yeah. Look at it. I mean, and so you got to use that in your evaluation process. But, I mean, I can go over here and look out at your lawn now, and it's a mix of bluegrass and tall fescues. And that's fine, as long as you know how to maintain that and understand what it is. Matter of fact, if you've got the right, yours is a little bit wider blade tall fescue than I would like to use, but Purdue is actually sending us in that direction in the cool season. They want you to use turf type tall fescues and bluegrasses because the turf type tall fescue is more drought resistant. So you look at long-term watering and things like that. If you have tall fescue plants, you're going to use less water. So it's more responsible. The problem is all right, when you go across all these lawns in Northwest Indiana, most of them are established. They're established in bluegrass with, say, rye and fine fescues, things like that. You can't go in there and start overseeding it with a turf type tall fescue. It won't look right. So you're going to try to keep working with the blues and the rye, and just because certain plants won't fill in by themselves. So some spread through rhizomes, some are single growth plants. So it's just a matter of knowing what you're dealing with and how to go about it.
One of the things I've noticed when you have your legendary backyard parties, your yard, I think everybody looks to see how does Permagreen's lawn look. And it does look good, but your lawn, if you look at it from above, you have different types of grasses, and that's not a mistake, is it?
No, it was a blended lawn to begin with. I mean, when I moved into my house 20 some odd years ago, the lawn was trash. It literally was probably one of the worst lawns I've ever seen. I've never renovated it. I just started feeding it and weed controlling it and mowing it high and doing the things that you want to do. I water it, do all that. By doing that, it became an excellent lawn. But if I'm standing on the second story, in the upstairs of my house, and I look down on the lawn, you can see the pockets of different grass, the different grass types throughout the lawn. You can see a pocket of bluegrass. It almost looks like aliens landed, and I get calls in the spring all the time. I'm standing in my lawn. You didn't fertilize my lawn evenly because I've got these different patches. No, it's different grass types reacting, and so you'll see different coloration in the lawn.
Well, and it does seem kind of, when you look at it from the standpoint, and you mentioned before that you would never take a garden and fill it up with 50 tomatoes because, the tomatoes compete with each other for nutrients, water, and everything else. It's pretty amazing to even think that a lawn can exist when you got millions and millions of grass plants all competing. And so does it make sense then that the reason you have different plants is so that you're not having too much competition with the same plant life? And
yeah, I mean, you'll see in a lawn like the best, straight bluegrass lawns, they're more prone to things because you've got a thatch layer that's thick. They produce rhizomes. Now the color can be amazing on a bluegrass lawn. It's the best for that. But on the other hand, you're also dealing with a plant that produces the most rhizomes, so it starts choking itself out to some degree. So if you're not maintaining the thatch layer, you're not keeping that in check, then yeah, there's too many plants there forcing growth and choking itself out.
And when you aerate, you also thatch. Is that correct?
Removing I guess the way to look at that is it's not the same thing as using a dethatching rake. Okay. A dethatching rake is removing thatch in an aggressive, like teasing your hair with a comb. Eventually you keep teasing it, it's going to thin out.
So that's my.
That's what's going on with your hair.
Yeah, it's from combing.
Yeah, it's from combing it too much. All right, no. Basically, an aerator is going to prune the thatch out. It's picking out pieces of thatch. A dethatcher is going in there and aggressively ripping out thatch. Okay, and it's tearing at the roots. So it's going to do some damage. That's why you see, like, when you go in there and aggressively dethatch a lawn, you'll see it goes completely brown almost. Or if you're down deep and plowing away at it, you'll see somebody's lawn look like they tore it apart. Now, sometimes it'll respond just fine, but if you get into a weird weather condition or if you do it at the wrong time of year, you dethatch it, you might damage it pretty badly. Whereas with an aerator, you're going through and you're just plucking out little pieces of it and allowing the lawn to take in things. So.
As far as
preferred.
Once you determine the right grass, and I know that when you do a lawn, you actually make sure that you control the consistency every year, and there's a plan to it. But once you have your seed down, what about starter fertilizers? Can you use any fertilizer, or
oh, yeah.
You can?
Yeah, and about the only time these days where you want to incorporate much phosphorus into it is when you're first starting the lawn. Okay, because that'll help the plant germinate. But then other times throughout the course of the year, you should not be running phosphorus on a regular basis because of pollutants and, affecting runoff into water supplies that create algae. Okay, so.
And that seems to be pretty important to your team, as you guys feel there's a lot of responsibilities of being a lawn care service. And I think that's kind of refreshing because I think there's a lot of people that have companies that really don't.
Most lawn care companies do respect the zero phosphorus points of it, and that's the way it should be. We're not looking to do anything, but anything detrimental to the environment. Most of us are very responsible about that. As far as getting new seed to germinate, though, that is the one time when you need to use that. And a starter fertilizer to help that along is a
So
great
you do
idea.
use starter fertilizer. It's just not something that's an ongoing thing. It's
No, it's not something where you need to keep using a starter fertilizer. No, the idea is to help the grass germinate and then move to something else.
Now, and the next point of lawn renovation is something that you're very dedicated. Your whole website seems to be dedicated to watering, best practice watering, and what have you. And obviously, if it's important to the life of the plant, what do you do? What do you need to know about watering on a renovated lawn with new seed?
Well, I mean, I guess, like if you're completely renovated and you're down to the ground, you got to treat it like it's a brand new lawn. You're going to have to water it daily and keep moisture to it. Sometimes twice a day, depending. But
What if it's just overseeding? What if you're
just aerating and overseeding and your lawn is fairly well established, it depends on time of year, but generally you can go to like maybe an every other day watering to get that to come up and go. You don't need to be watering it every day because the soil has a way of holding some moisture to it. Now, if it's supremely dry or something and you have an area that's bare, then yeah, you're going to have to water that daily.
now? And you've actually done several podcasts dedicated to watering. The first one is how to water your lawn whether you got clay, sandy soil, sod, new seed. So you talk a little bit about that in that podcast, and I'd welcome people to listen to it because I found that to be very informative. But you have another podcast that you did on how to water your lawn to revitalize it after drought. That's another one that I highly recommend our listeners listen to because I think both of those were very valuable to how I treat my lawn and how to water it. And at the end of the day, I still think that a lot of the things you've done for me to help me is show me how to cut my lawn and how to water and stuff. And my yard is proof of it works. So what do we have? Okay, so after watering, we have when, why, and how to water. How often? I know we've covered that extensively in our other podcasts and blogs, but what's just a general overview of when, why, and how to water after reseeding or after renovation?
Well, after reseeding is different than the regular watering, and you'll just, when you put seed down, you want to help it germinate and go. As I said, most of the time it depends on the situation. How does that lawn hold moisture? The idea to get seed to go is it's got to have soil moisture. So is your lawn one that dries out quickly? Is your lawn something that once you water it, it stays wet? So that'd be a big determination on how you want to water the new seed and how to attack it. You can put seed down in the fall, and most of the time it does its thing on its own.
Really?
I mean, if you've got moisture coming in the fall and, your soil stays damp, it's fine. If you got to water it because it's dry, it depends on the annual conditions. I can't, tell you exactly how to water each scenario. You just got to play it out and see how it goes.
And one of the biggest problems that I had prior to hiring you was I would move the sprinkler nonstop. I would throw it on an area and I'd run it like every other day. And I would run it for short periods of time and move it. And you had said that was one of the worst things I could do, and you believed in less watering, but heavy watering.
On an established lawn, you water it once, depending on your soil type.
But you talk about how when you water it more, you're allowing the roots to grow deeper into the ground. I would think that establishing overseeding and new spots, that would be important that you...
Well, your root system isn't down there. So when you're establishing new seed, the roots are at the surface.
Oh, so yeah, it's not going down to the...
Yeah, you're not getting... You can water it as deep as you want, but depending on the soil type, if you're sitting in a loamy or sandy soil and you water it deeply and go back 5 days later, I mean, that's not going to work for new seed.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're in a clay soil and it's holding the water and the moisture's so it just all depends.
So once again, I thought I had it figured out and I didn't.
No, yeah, I mean, it's just, It depends on what you're dealing with and how like I said, is your lawn established? Is it a renovation job? Two different types of lawn.
You always say that you'd never stop learning about lawn care. And every time we do a podcast, I realize how much I've learned, but how little I know. The next one we have on our list seems kind of obvious.
I feel the same way most of the time. Every day's a learning experience.
So we have next to stay off the lawn. That seems pretty obvious, but people have families, they have pets, and what's the general practice with staying off the lawn?
If you're starting from scratch, you're staying off the lawn. I mean,
for how long?
Probably 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how quickly it matures. You should generally start mowing that lawn at about 4. But I mean, as far as like heavy activity, you need to wait. You need to let it develop. It should be about probably 3 or 4 mows in before you really start using the lawn as a practical thing. So, and you're generally not mowing it for 3 to 4 weeks from the time that you've seeded it. So.
Okay, so next we have when to mow. How do you know when you can start mowing?
Generally, the rule of thumb is going to be after the plant reaches about 4 to 5 inches, you're going to have to start cutting it. Like that first cut, you want to let it grow up to about 4 at least before you put that first mow on it.
Is it like normal cutting, best practice mowing, where you want to set your wheels at the highest setting? Or?
Correct. You don't want to cut a whole lot off of that. You want it to grow and become what it's going to be. I mean, mowing height is generally, it should be high for most grass plants. At least in our cool season. The only one that tolerates low mowing pretty well would be bent grass, which is not really what you're seeding with. That's more along the lines of a golf course. But and it's usually considered a weed in most lawns that it's infiltrated. But
now as far as the actual beyond mowing, what about bag clippings? Do you bag it? Do you normally do a combination, or what is it you recommend as far as clippings?
You don't have to you don't have to bag your clippings at all, as long as you're cutting consistently.
Okay.
I mean, as far as if you're mowing every 3 to 4 days and you're barely cutting, just shaving the top growth, you never have to bag it. If you, for some reason, have let it go, say you were on vacation, you haven't mowed it in 8 to 10 days, well, that's a whole different ballgame. You don't want to cut too much off the plant and let it lay down in there and choke something off.
One of the things that really, I know how important it is to follow the proper procedures for mowing and stuff, but one of the things that seemed a little bit obsessive was when you said that ideally you should be cutting your lawn every 3 or 4 days, and there's a lot of benefits to it. It's a lot of cutting. It's a lot of mowing. But why? Right. What are the advantages if you're prepared to? And you actually have a trick to allowing your customers to not have to cut so often and still have the same benefits. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what do you get from cutting the lawn every 3 or 4 days versus every 2 weeks? A lot of people wait every 2 weeks because they don't want to cut.
I don't know anybody who can get away with waiting every 2 weeks around here, but unless it's in the middle of summer and we're not getting much upgrowth. But in the spring, generally, you're stuck probably at every 5 or 6 days at a minimum with the amount of rain we generally get. Now, last spring might have been an anomaly where we didn't get much rain and nobody was cutting in May. But most seasons, you're probably cutting every 5 to 6 days at the minimum.
What are the advantages of cutting every 4 to 5 days versus every 8 to 9 days? What?
Anytime you're cutting off more than 1/3 of the grass plant, you're doing damage to it. So you never want to cut more than 1/3 of the grass plant off at any given time if you can avoid it. Like I said, you're gone and you have to come back to it, and it's it's been 8 to 10 days and you're cutting off, 6 inches, dealing with a 6-inch, 7-inch tall lawn. Cut it as high as you can, wait a couple days, come back in and cut it again at that same level.
Now, is mowing a lawn, is that like pruning, where the more you prune it, the thicker it grows out and the stronger the root system?
Depends on the grass type. I mean, some single growth grasses, no. I mean, it's not expanding through rhizomes. But yeah, when you're talking about like a bluegrass lawn, yeah, it's doing that. Tall fescue lawns do that, is they have a rhizomous spread rate. Now they're slower than bluegrass, not nearly as aggressive, but yeah, if you have some rhizomous activity, then yes, you can expand a lawn in that way.
Now, when is your lawn established? When you can start treating it like it's no longer a new seedling and it's just now an established lawn?
Yeah, a new seed lawn, probably about anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks, as far as just to be able to go into a heavier usage. But
So your lawn is established. Does your fertilizer plans, does it take into consideration a difference between a renovated lawn versus the lawn that's like yours where it's very well established?
You could start with the starter plan. I mean, if it wasn't fed upon initial seed, you could actually put a starter right away. So we could take over at any one point. A lot of times when you initially put in the lawn, you're going to use a starter fertilizer right away, sometimes even mixed in with it. So depending on how you do it. At that point, we would be talking 4 weeks before you'd feed it again. 4, 5, 6 weeks with another starter fertilizer. So we can take over at any one point.
Well, I remember with the first year you did my lawn in my backyard, and it's probably, our listeners probably have heard this enough times about how bad my yard was with the sun bouncing off the windows and just cooking my backyard in the clay, and it was just and at the first year I was so excited that I finally saw grass growing in certain spots and stuff. But you told me to hold off from getting too excited because the next year was going to be better, because you were going to, at the end of the season, assess where you're at. How important is it to assess the lawn at the end of the season, and how does that have anything to do with the following year now that you're established and things are on track?
Well, I mean, our applicators are always assessing what they see when they're out there, and they should, if there's something going on, they should tell you. So it's a process, but your lawn didn't require a bunch of seed. Your lawn actually had a good establishment. You just didn't have the results based on the way you were kind of doing it. And so
I think I also missed
a more aggressive fertilization program, learning how to mow properly, learning how to water properly, changed a whole lot of the game for you. And
doing fourth quarter fertilizer, because I always took the fourth quarter off thinking, season's over, I'm putting everything away, and
that's the best time to feed. So
you emphasize that to me, that is the most important fertilizer of the year.
Yeah, and you always want to make sure that you're supplying nutrients later in the fall. It goes into how the plant uses it the next spring and helps establish its root system.
So Steve, we really appreciate your sharing your solutions and ways that people can make sure that they maintain a healthy lawn. If somebody wants to learn more about Permagreen or check out some of your community pages, your blogs, your tools, where can they learn more about your solutions?
At our website, Permagreen, www.perma-green.com.
It's Permagreen, folks. Hey, Steve, thanks a lot for joining us today, and we hope everybody has happy green lawns, and have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Thank you, Gino.
Thank you.